On a blood moon night, a group of people were engaged in a fierce battle with each other. Tsubaki momentarily thought he had achieved complete victory, but was unexpectedly ambushed by his opponent, causing him to fail. In the end, both embraced each other tightly and fell together. Elsewhere, Akira was being attacked by a young boy who sadly wished he could run with Akira once more. Akira sank deeper into the deep water, her crimson eyes suddenly opening, and immediately her body was surrounded by a brilliant red sphere. In that moment, she apologized to the boy, as if it were her final words. Meanwhile, two girls were stabbing each other, and exactly as planned, both were ultimately defeated by their opponents. Everyone everywhere was desperately trying to kill each other. Two individuals discussed fate. Then they too engaged in combat, embracing each other as they fell. Yet in the past, they all had very peaceful lives. One morning at Diori Dojo, Chihiro and Kotsu were training as usual at the dojo where Kotsu's father was the instructor. In a moment of carelessness, Kotsu lost to Chihiro. Kotsu scolded him for playing dirty, but to Chihiro, victory was victory regardless of whether it was fair play or not. And those who complained about defeat only revealed their immaturity. This was the purest essence of swordsmanship. Chihiro understood this well. Feeling unsatisfied, Kotsu demanded a rematch, but Chihiro calmly shook his head in refusal, as he had to prepare breakfast for everyone. While slicing cucumbers, Chihiro absent-mindedly cut his hand, the knife blade slicing a bloody line across his hand. When breakfast was served, Kotsu ate with immense happiness. He praised his brother's rolled eggs as the best in the world. Chihiro shared the cooking recipe with his younger brother, but the only thing Kotsu cared about was having food to eat. Seeing this, Chihiro disagreed, feeling as if this useless brother couldn't survive without him. He sternly instructed his brother to learn to cook for himself, because he wasn't Kotsu's wife and couldn't always be there for him. Kotsu innocently dreamed about a future where the two brothers would always be together, how they would take over the dojo together, with Chihiro as the instructor and himself as the assistant. After this, they boarded the train to school. On the train, Kotsu kept mentioning the future as dojo instructors. Chihiro modestly suggested that Kotsu was stronger than him, but in reality, Kotsu had never beaten him. Actually, Chihiro was planning to leave home. Kotsu's father had adopted him since childhood, raised him, and paid for his university education. But he still intended to leave, though he couldn't tell his brother the reason. He hadn't made a definite decision yet, so he wanted his brother to keep it a secret. Kotsu worried about the dojo's future if Chihiro left. Today at school was a peaceful morning, and their friend innocently discussed breakfast when they had a free first period. Suddenly, a strange frequency sound was transmitted. Even covering their ears didn't block it. Everyone collapsed in dizziness, with only Chihiro remaining conscious. He picked up Kotsu, reminding him to stay strong. Then suddenly, a red mist carrying poison began to flood and envelop everything. By this point, Chihiro had also passed out. Everyone disappeared in the mist, leaving only their clothes behind. In a different dimension, Chihiro met a blonde girl dressed in Lolita fashion. She said that everything they saw was just another constructed dimension, and everything inside it would eventually vanish, leaving no trace when this void landscape disappeared. With his IQ of 200, Chihiro quickly caught up with the conversation, understanding that everything was just a dream. The girl invited him to discuss fate. Chihiro felt the girl's words were forced. The girl continued rambling about the power still imprisoned within him, like a king chained beneath a cherry blossom tree, and how humans had researched to find answers but in vain. By this point, Chihiro completely failed to understand what the girl was saying or who she was. The girl introduced herself as Dux, and she promised to meet him again in this world. Chihiro awoke in the university hospital. Surrounded by doctors and nurses, they informed him that he was the last to regain consciousness. While others had awakened after a week, he alone took 5 months to open his eyes. Even more frightening was that everyone had dreamed the exact same dream as him. Outside, Tokyo was suffering a serious disaster. Giant trees had sprouted everywhere, and the city was completely engulfed in red mist. The doctor called this the Great Unconsciousness Event. No one knew what had happened during the week when everyone was unconscious. Upon hearing that he had awakened, Kotsu had tearfully rushed to take him home. Immediately after leaving the hospital, a pair of journalists approached him, as he was the last person to wake up. On the way home, Chihiro felt a headache and dozed off briefly. In his dream, he saw Kotsu's father lying in a pool of blood, with Chihiro himself standing over him. Sharp spikes pierced through his father's hand, making him scream violently. He woke up startled, and they had returned to the dojo. Just then, the strange sound rang out again. It was caused by a man and a girl. Then a huge explosion collapsed the entire dojo. A monster appeared, and to their shock, it was Kotsu's father. The monster lunged to slash Chihiro, but he managed to dodge. Kotsu handed him a staff. Utilizing his trained skills, Chihiro charged forward. But he couldn't bring himself to strike, as flashbacks of his master kept appearing in his mind. This hesitation gave the monster an opportunity to slash through his shoulder, causing fresh blood to spray everywhere. In the moment near death, the latent power within his body erupted. His wound quickly healed itself. His eyes turned red. The blood solidified into sharp spikes surrounding his body, looking like a duplicate of Tokyo Ghoul. In an instant, he used his internal energy to break the monster's sword and cut off its hand. The monster charged toward him but was cut in half by Chihiro. Seeing this, the girl who had been observing expressed clear disappointment. She saw that Chihiro had awakened, which would be a nuisance for her later. After the fierce battle, the monster fell, but when the light faded, Chihiro was shocked to realize the creature was his adoptive father. He couldn't believe his eyes, distraught and losing control, torturing himself for harboring hatred toward him all this time, only to take the life of the most important person with his own hands. At that moment, Aiko appeared, gently soothing his pain. Chihiro had truly collapsed, while Kotsu was so confused he couldn't distinguish reality. Aiko told them not to say anything, that she would explain everything. The police quickly arrived at the scene, with the female officer and her colleagues conducting an investigation, but none of them understood what had happened. When questioning Aiko, she said she was a classmate of the two brothers, and her presence was just a coincidence. The police concluded that Kotsu's father was missing, and considered it just another mysterious disappearance like many recent cases. After the Great Coma, 10,000 people had disappeared. Rumors spread that the missing had turned into red mist or bloodthirsty monsters, which sounded absurd but sowed seeds of doubt in everyone's minds. When taking Chihiro home, Kotsu confronted the girl, still thinking everything was just a dream. Aiko advised him to accept the harsh truth, and to understand why his father had become like that. She believed he had been transformed, and suspected he had seen a man wearing a blue coat and glasses. Kotsu remembered that person, but couldn't understand why he would do such a thing, as they clearly had no grudge against each other. Seeing Chihiro stir slightly, Aiko ordered Kotsu to be quiet, saying she would explain everything to him later, and she was sure her master, Chihiro, would want to know too. Once again, Chihiro drifted into a hallucination. In it, he saw a distorted crimson space, saw himself being stabbed by a completely white person, who was crying and calling his name. He woke with a start to find Aiko beside him. He recognized her as a girl from his seminar class. Aiko advised him to rest, as he had used too much power. Mentioning power, he realized his wounds had completely healed, but also that he was the one who killed his adoptive father. Aiko informed Kotsu, who was practicing swordsmanship outside, that Chihiro had woken up. Aiko remained by his side, taking care of him in every detail, even cooking breakfast as if nothing had happened. She called him master. Chihiro didn't understand why, as they had barely spoken in class. Aiko still kept many secrets, waiting for the day when he would remember his true identity. She reminded everyone to eat breakfast, as they never knew when disaster would strike again. After the meal, Chihiro knelt before the training room, unsure if his adoptive father could forgive him. After all, his hands were stained with blood. Then Aiko accompanied the two brothers to school. There, someone was going crazy, attacking surrounding students. Doctors and nurses quickly arrived to intervene. The doctor quickly recognized Chihiro, even knowing his full name and apparently his true identity. The teacher said he would see Chihiro again soon. According to Aiko's explanation, the gate between the human world and the monster world had opened, and enemies were exploiting transformed bodies to cross over, spreading fear and destruction. Kotsu's father was an example, and Chihiro was fortunate to be given the power to survive. Their mission was to fight and destroy, but Chihiro couldn't shake off his trauma, having killed his adoptive father with his own hands. Aiko explained she was there to ensure Chihiro's survival. Chihiro slammed the table, demanding Aiko's true identity, but Aiko remained certain that Chihiro already knew her. Suddenly his eyes flashed red again, but he insisted he was fine. In the bathroom, he wondered what had happened to him. Then the strange sound rang out once more, this time caused by a girl. Chihiro saw and chased after her. She seemed to be luring him. Noticing Chihiro was taking too long in the restroom, Aiko and Kotsu decided to look for him. Their panicked actions caught the eye of a journalist. Chihiro chased the girl to the main hall, where he met his close friend. The sound rang out again, and everyone collapsed. The mysterious girl stood on the stairs, observing everything. She said she wished Chihiro had died. Then she rang the bell again. Despite Chihiro's screams, the students in the school gradually turned into monsters. He screamed, begging her to spare everyone. The man who often accompanied the girl appeared, saying that all those of monster lineage must die. He ordered the girl, Yuri, to act. Kotsu and Aiko rushed to the scene. The man decided to take action himself. He snapped his fingers, and Kotsu's head felt like it would explode. He fell to the ground. Aiko hugged Chihiro's legs, begging him to remember everything and awaken his power. To awaken the heroic blood sleeping within him, and his bloodline would do the rest. Kotsu still frantically held his head, screaming. Chihiro couldn't do it. He feared Kotsu would also become a monster, and he would repeat his mistake. He would rather die than kill people important to him. Kotsu did not transform into a monster, but instead awakened his power. He transformed into a ghoul duplicate and charged to attack. He aimed directly at the black-haired man who had turned his father into a monster. It turned out Kotsu also belonged to the lineage of heroes. The black-haired man, seeing another target to eliminate, thought this was a good opportunity to kill two troublesome people at once. Then he snapped his fingers again, turning more people into monsters, believing everyone of heroic lineage must die. Chihiro still stood there, not wanting to stain his hands with blood again. But Kotsu was hit by a powered-up monster and sent flying through a wall. Kotsu had awakened, but despite carrying the blood of heroes, he was still too weak. After witnessing Kotsu nearly lose his life, Chihiro could not bear to see another important person leave him. So in that moment, the latent power within his body erupted again, allowing him to awaken once more and deliver a decisive blow to defeat the monster threatening to finish off his brother. However, immediately afterward, Kotsu's body was poisoned by the monster's spear, the toxin spreading and making his life extremely fragile. In this desperate situation, there was only one way to save him. Kotsu had to remember and call out Aiko's real name, not the borrowed fake name she had been using all this time. Chihiro struggled to search his memories until a name emerged from his subconscious. He called out Aiko's real name, Surdid. Surdid smiled brightly in acknowledgement. Instantly, a halo surrounded her, helping her transform into her true form as a blonde fairy. In that moment, she transformed, shedding her everyday disguise to become a true guardian, henceforth with the title Surdid, the one destined to protect Chihiro and care for Kotsu. She took on the mission to heal Kotsu. With his powered-up strength, Chihiro was able to finish off the monster with just one strike. Despite saving Kotsu, a feeling of intense suffering rose within Chihiro, as he had once again inadvertently ended the life of a monster. While deep down he was still aware that before its transformation, it had been a human and a normal student just like him. This thought caused him to nearly lose control, the feeling of guilt weighing heavily as his hands continued to be stained with blood. Surdid consoled him that it was the only way, but Chihiro went mad because he couldn't keep using that as an excuse to kill innocent people. Surdid understood that feeling, but once someone became a monster, there was no turning back. From a distance, the journalist had arrived to hunt for news. He questioned Chihiro about killing his adoptive father, and immediately labeled him a murderer. This would become hot news on the front page. Suddenly, the black-haired man and Yuri appeared from behind to cause trouble. He could cast infinite monster summoning spells as long as there were humans to activate the gate. He believed that all those of heroic lineage must die, and he would be the one to carry this out. He powered up a monster to attack Chihiro. Fortunately, the blood armor protected him. He continued to power up the monster, transforming it into a gigantic form. The giant monster charged straight at him, launching an attack aimed at him. But at that moment, the strange blood shell surrounding Chihiro's body protected him just in time, preventing him from being seriously injured. Not only that, but this shell also amplified the power within, making him significantly stronger. However, the price to pay was also terribly steep, as the human body could not endure this type of power indefinitely. Though he grew stronger with each battle, if he continued, his body would soon collapse. The black-haired man couldn't understand his power. Strange sounds emanated from Chihiro's body, the sound waves spreading throughout the space. The female reporter Tsubasa accidentally heard it, clutched her head in pain, her body gradually losing control. In that chaotic moment, another girl appeared, urgently calling for Kurihara, Tsubasa's colleague, to quickly awaken the heroic blood within him, as only this could save her. With no way to retreat, Kurihara was forced to call out Tsubasa's real name. When that true name was uttered, the sealed power within her erupted, and Tsubasa immediately transformed into Aiko, a beautiful warrior with superior strength, officially becoming one who carries the blood of heroes. Thanks to Aiko's awakening, the situation immediately turned around. She charged forward to defeat a monster, while Chihiro also concentrated his power to defeat the enemy before him. As Chihiro prepared to deliver the finishing blow to the main villain, another mysterious girl intervened, allowing him to temporarily escape Chihiro's sword. Painful memories flooded back. Chihiro clutched his head in agony, feeling himself bound by a chain of cruel fate, where power was both a blessing and a shackle. Their friend had not yet turned into a monster. Thanks to the help of the doctor and teammates, he was temporarily safe. Together, they all brought Chihiro's group to the church, a sacred fortress of the heroic lineage. There, their supreme leader appeared, the blonde girl in the Lolita dress whom Chihiro had met in his dream. Her title was Dux. This place was where they fought against chaos, their enemy and the force that caused the world to become chaotic. Dux sternly explained about the predetermined fate. She said that 40 years later, this world would certainly be destroyed, and when that destruction came, only a hero with the title of the Crimson Lotus King could save humanity. Those carrying heroic blood all had the potential to become the Crimson Lotus King, but if that person did not appear, the world would quickly sink into chaos and despair. This prophecy made the journalist half believing and half doubting, but Dux reminded him that even the monsters now manifesting before their eyes had once been considered absurd. So everyone needed to believe this truth. Meanwhile, in another place, another mysterious group was discussing their plans. They were the ones who had caused the Great Collapse, opened the gate for creatures from another world to flood in, and their goal was to exterminate the entire lineage of heroes. At the church, Dux declared that the only way to stop the chaos was to destroy Tokyo, ending the gate connecting the two worlds. Hearing this, many were shocked, as it was not just a city, but home to millions of innocent people. Surdid emphasized that the Guardians existed precisely to prevent this great collapse. While everyone was still debating, Tsubasa had returned to human form, though Aiko's soul still existed within her. Kurihara, unable to accept reality, placed all responsibility and blame on Chihiro, resenting him for allegedly taking Tsubasa away before. Although Shoko had emphasized that once transformed into a demonic messenger, there was no way back, Kurihara could not quell his anger. He stood alone in the yard, cigarette flickering, eyes full of resentment, vowing to himself that he would find out the truth and punish Chihiro at all costs. Their friend was being taken to the doctor. The doctor explained that people who could transform into monsters carried a special gene. This gene had a special connection to the gate. Chihiro thought everything was his fault. In his delirium, Chihiro was drawn into another space, where Dux forced him to make a choice. Either accept that his hands would continue to be stained with blood and turn everything to ashes in exchange for a new future, or seek fragile redemption. When he awoke, his hands were still covered in blood. Chihiro and the others began the mission to destroy the barriers. After being instructed on how to use his powers correctly, he grew visibly stronger. The others could only stand around watching, as they lacked the power to carry out this mission. To save the future, the only path was to wipe out Tokyo, ending the gate allowing monsters to flood in. While his group was taking action, at the hideout of the villains, they began to argue among themselves. The ringleader was unwilling to let those with heroic blood do as they pleased, believing this would put them at a disadvantage. But the black-haired man did not have enough power to destroy Chihiro. He mentioned a very powerful mysterious character, but was immediately scolded by the leader, forced to be silent as it was taboo. The black-haired man left, leaving only him and his daughter Yuri. In the heavy atmosphere, he called his daughter close, admitting that only she could save him. Although he didn't want to put her in danger, he also understood that things had reached a dead end. Meanwhile, after destroying 2 barriers in a short time, Chihiro's group returned to the church. Chihiro had used too much strength, his body exhausted and drained, but he believed that as long as he could protect the world, any personal sacrifice was acceptable. Seeing this determination and resilience, Shoko praised him, affirming how fortunate it was to have him on their side. Otherwise, the agents of chaos would become increasingly reckless, even beyond control. According to her, Once all the remaining barriers were destroyed, Tokyo would automatically collapse, the door between the two worlds would close, and the madness of the villains would be stopped. Suddenly, Chihiro unconsciously fainted. In his dream, he saw more scenes of chaos, more new victims screaming, and reminded himself that at all costs, he must destroy all remaining barriers to save the future. The doctor hurriedly told him to rest, instructing him not to sacrifice himself. He would take him to the restroom. But Chihiro would not allow himself to stop. Stepping outside, Chihiro encountered the journalist. He again used sarcastic words, claiming Chihiro was cruel, and although a hero in name, he himself would not participate in this campaign because he didn't want to be drawn into the smell of death. Returning to his private room, Chihiro pondered deeply. In his mind, he imagined pools of foul-smelling blood, saw shadows passing through thick fog, all heavy and haunting. Surdid had been sitting there for some time, asking about his condition, but Chihiro remained immersed in his own inner conflict. Elsewhere, on a crowded street, a couple was walking side by side, the young man bearing the rough appearance of a street boy. At the school, the nurse knocked on the door to find the doctor collapsed on the floor. In his broken breath, he only had time to say he needed medicine to hold on, while instructing her to go alone tonight, as he would not be able to accompany her. If she didn't go, many things would become inconvenient, so she got on her high-powered motorcycle and sped away. As night fell, while Chihiro was continuing his work, he was interrupted by two people from the Chaos faction. Kotsu quickly realized that without humans, the enemy would not be able to create monsters. Immediately, Chihiro launched a series of attacks aimed directly at the black-haired man. The nurse refused to be outdone, activating her skills and joining the fight. After a team combat sequence, Yuri and Chihiro faced each other. He asked Yuri who she really was. Yuri remained silent, while the black-haired man beside her couldn't understand why she wasn't giving her all against the enemy. Yuri was slightly distracted, and Chihiro quickly struck at her. In an instant, he found himself standing amid thick white mist. There, Yuri appeared again, suggesting this was a memory gradually re-emerging. Chihiro turned to leave, but the girl continuously followed, declaring that he couldn't escape by just walking around in here. Chihiro didn't understand why Yuri kept following him. The two began to argue, each believing the other's ideals were mistaken. Yuri argued that Chihiro couldn't destroy the barrier because it would cause Tokyo to collapse, with most people unable to survive. Chihiro countered that it was all because Yuri had turned people into monsters. In reality, Surdid had lost track of Chihiro. In the realm of memory, he kept trying to escape but became increasingly lost. Yuri suddenly made a proposal, suggesting they forget everything and stay in this place. She didn't care about anything else, believing being with Chihiro was best. Chihiro disagreed, and the girl continued to propose that they could temporarily set aside their enmity, become allies to leave this place together. She led Chihiro to a large stone, explaining it was a source of energy, and if they charged it with enough energy, it would open an escape route. Chihiro impatiently drew his weapon to try breaking it, but the girl stopped him, saying that wasn't the way. Nevertheless, Chihiro stubbornly used his power. She had to remind him to focus all his energy on a single point, controlling the flow rather than wastefully forcing power. In that moment, Chihiro's childhood memories surfaced. He saw again the image of a woman, who was none other than Yuri. As he was still confused, his consciousness gradually faded, and he collapsed on the ground. Yuri sat beside him, just smiling as she watched, then left with a message that all mistakes originated from Chihiro's mother. Chihiro remained with many questions about who this girl really was. After reappearing, Chihiro immediately stood up to protect his teammates. This resolute action stunned the enemy team, especially when they witnessed Yuri, whom they had trusted for her power, fail miserably against Chihiro. A feeling of unease immediately rose within them, causing the group to quickly recognize the unstable situation and forcing them to retreat to avoid danger and check on Yuri's condition. Everyone landed on the ground, while Chihiro's mind kept recalling the recent events. The atmosphere became heavy. Surdid questioned Chihiro about what had just happened, as she had lost track of him and couldn't move. But Chihiro remained pensive, saying he needed some quiet space and wanted to be alone. Meanwhile, Kakatsu, who was also in the church, recalled the horrific scene he had witnessed firsthand. A girl wearing an eye patch had appeared and summoned a terrifying horde of monsters. Shoko recounted that he had to face a member of the Guardian Society, an organization established long ago to protect Japan since before the country was founded, and it was clear they had now become adversaries. The nurse wondered why Chihiro had suddenly disappeared during the battle, about the vague feeling of the glasses-wearing man, but he only replied that he couldn't remember clearly what had happened. In the tense atmosphere, the journalist was extremely annoyed at being called in. Their information was being leaked, and there was a possibility of an insider spy. The society began to suspect he might be a spy, but he countered that becoming a spy wouldn't bring any benefit to himself. Seeing the situation was not good, everyone set aside the investigation. Regardless of the outcome, the fact they were ambushed was real. Rushing now would only lead to unstable results. Faced with unresolved doubts, the current mission was temporarily postponed. Chihiro maintained his heavy expression, always lost in thought. He sought out the doctor to share what had happened earlier, recounting Yuri's words that everything was because of his mother, while realizing he had no memories of his childhood, not even remembering his mother's face. Unexpectedly, the journalist interrupted, asserting that he knew more than Chihiro. He questioned why Chihiro couldn't remember anything, even when major events had occurred. Then he began to recount the truth from 10 years ago. Chihiro's mother had worked at a top-secret scientific facility, where all research was never published. Afterward, she and her husband both disappeared, their bodies never found. The journalist went further, suggesting that Chihiro himself was the one who had killed his parents, and he remembered how Chihiro had stabbed them, prompting the doctor to immediately intervene to stop such bitter words. After the incident, Chihiro and Kakatsu went to the hospital, but he still maintained a sad and heavy expression, his mind haunted by what he had just heard. Upon returning, they unexpectedly ran into a female inspector and the girl from the previous combat. She introduced herself as a member of the Guardian Society, and the young girl with her was Tsubaki. The two announced that the Guardian Society was investigating the culprit behind a series of mysterious recent disappearances, the suspect being a man named Aoi, who usually wore a blue coat and sunglasses. Hearing this, Koksu couldn't maintain his composure, immediately grabbed the other's collar and demanded to know Aoi's whereabouts. The female inspector replied that she herself was in the process of hunting him down. In that situation, Koksu proactively offered to join forces, and his proposal was quickly accepted. He would never forgive Aoi. The two girls also allowed them to cooperate in the investigation. All these developments were witnessed by the doctor from afar. As for Chihiro, he went to a small house, surrounded by vibrant flower beds. But right after, a pool of blood appeared before his eyes, shocking him, only to realize it was all just a dream. Meanwhile, the doctor was diligently researching, trying to create a mysterious red stone. Just when it seemed he had succeeded, he failed. The journalist was throwing papers around in anger, while Shoko silently swept the churchyard. The female inspector sat in deep thought, but was then called back by the journalist. The doctor continued to work in a state of exhaustion, and it seemed everyone was busy with their own missions. Chihiro sat quietly in the garden, cradling a flower branch, a faint smile appearing on his face. The nurse went to the doctor, advising him not to overwork, but he only replied that he didn't have much time left. During this time, Aoi had come into view, secretly monitored and photographed by the journalist and Arrow. Chihiro still regularly visited his friend in the hospital, always blaming himself for everything. The doctor had given him a ray of hope by saying he was finding a treatment method. Everything was progressing very well. He wanted to do everything he could, so he wouldn't have to live with regrets later. Under the sunset, the doctor confided that he had once tried to destroy the laboratory, but was eventually brought to the church by ducks, as if it were fate's arrangement. Chihiro expressed that he only hoped to be forgiven, wanted to escape this pain, and didn't want to continue killing. The doctor immediately consoled him, affirming that he had found a solution to cure Chihiro. On the Guardian Society's side, they had concluded that the person behind everything was Aoi, but also doubted that they might be targeting the wrong person. That night, Chihiro dreamed of the doctor collapsing in a pool of blood, causing him to wake up in panic. He immediately called the hospital, but couldn't reach the doctor. Only the nurse answered. He told the nurse to quickly transfer the call to the doctor, but she couldn't find him either. In extreme worry, Chihiro rushed out to search. Elsewhere, the journalist and Arrow were also searching for clues, finally managing to unlock the password on someone's computer, causing the journalist to grin with satisfaction, having found the data he needed. In desperation, Chihiro ran everywhere, frantically searching for the doctor. When passing by a house, he caught sight of Yuri happily playing with a group of small children. Meanwhile, the Guardian team was suddenly attacked. Koksu rushed to help, but the girl said he didn't need to worry about her and should chase after the culprit. However, Koksu insisted that he couldn't leave her behind. On a high place, under the cold moonlight, the doctor suddenly howled in pain like a wild wolf. The terrifying truth gradually became clear that he was the monster that had just appeared and caused the horrific battle Koksu had to face. Tsubaki had woken up, fortunately having survived after being close to death. She told Marie that she could no longer see any trace of Aoi, as when she arrived, she only saw the victim and someone who had been transformed. Marie was surprised that the transformed one acted alone and concealed their presence very well. This transformed one was completely different from those they had encountered before. In a dark alley, a gang of thugs was searching for someone on orders from their superior. The person they needed to find was the doctor. But when another teammate returned with dinner, the gang was left with only 3 corpses. Earlier, Chihiro hadn't been able to answer the phone, so now he was able to contact the nurse again. After searching, the nurse found that the doctor wasn't in the clinic. Chihiro had a premonition that something bad would happen to him. The nurse still innocently believed that the doctor was just overworking himself, nothing to worry about, and they should leave him alone. Because of that dream, Chihiro was very worried and determined to find the doctor. He called Shoko at the church to ask about his whereabouts, saying he had seen the doctor in a nightmare. Outside, the thugs were also searching everywhere for the doctor. Shoko felt she didn't have time to care about Chihiro's silly dreams. Helpless, he returned to the familiar house, tormenting himself, not knowing what to do. He held his head, recalling the doctor's instructions. As long as he persevered and didn't give up, he would find a solution, so he decided to meet the doctor to talk properly. On the other side, the doctor had contacted the nurse again. He asked about the research situation and apologized to her because from now on, he would hand everything over to her. The nurse criticized him for being selfish. After hanging up, he felt his head hurting terribly, teeth growing fangs as if about to transform into a monster. Unfortunately, Aoi's henchmen had found him. They surrounded him, demanding he wait there until Jun, their superior, arrived. Hearing about Jun, the doctor advised the thugs to quickly run away too. They just laughed mockingly, thinking the doctor was joking. At that moment, Chihiro had also arrived. The doctor advised Chihiro to stay away and not get involved with him. But Chihiro still couldn't understand the issue and warned the doctor that he was in danger. The thugs kindly advised him to stay away, yet Chihiro prepared to fight them. The doctor gritted his teeth, bared his fangs, transformed into a wolf, and quickly jumped into the river to escape. The thugs scolded Chihiro for daring to let their prey escape, and they wouldn't be able to explain this to their superior. Chihiro didn't understand what was happening. He thoughtfully returned to the church where everyone had gathered. The journalist immediately affirmed that the doctor was the traitor. He then produced a photo as evidence. It showed an orphanage where the doctor and Aoi had grown up together. The two were almost like blood brothers. According to Shoko's reasoning, from the beginning, the doctor had been on the other side, which could explain why he always opposed everyone's actions. Only Chihiro spoke up to defend the doctor, arguing they couldn't determine he was a traitor just based on one photo. But the journalist brought forth another piece of information. That orphanage was directly managed by the Aval Science Council, Chihiro's mother's organization, which always portrayed a good image to the public. Behind that were illegal activities related to weapons development and unauthorized experiments. That science council was their enemy. Shoko concluded that organization was also on the side of chaos. Chihiro refused to believe this. The journalist produced another photo, showing the chairman of Aval with his daughter Yuri. Chihiro immediately recognized her. At this point, everyone had to accept the truth that the doctor was the one who had leaked information to protect the children in the orphanage, his home. The orphanage was located right in the barrier area of the tower. If it were destroyed, the children would die. The nurse further explained that she too had grown up in that house, which was actually an underground scientific research facility, where children were subjected to experiments that tortured their bodies. Both she and the doctor were failed products abandoned after experiments, and thanks to that, they had luckily survived. Due to the effects of those studies, the doctor still suffered long-term consequences, his body gradually running out of time, his fate seemingly about to close. Chihiro went to the orphanage, remembering the image of Yuri happily playing with the children, unable to understand what that smile meant. He returned to the familiar house, where there were purple flower clusters. Yuri came from somewhere, complimenting how beautiful these flowers were. They were called rosemary. Chihiro called her name. Yuri smiled in response, even praising that the hot cocoa she had once drunk in this house was very delicious. She had tried to make it again, but couldn't make it as good as his mother. Chihiro couldn't remember anything. He only knew Yuri's name through what others had told him. He had nothing, could do nothing, and was about to lose someone important to him. Yuri offered to help Chihiro. Strangely, whenever beside Yuri, Chihiro would forget all enemies, forget even his own teammates, and only want to stay forever by her side. He questioned Yuri about the pain he had lost. Yuri just sat down pensively on the chair. Chihiro moved to sit beside her. At this time, Aoi was still searching for the doctor. His accomplices were also trying their best. The inspector approached, tapping them on the shoulder to ask for some information. Finally, Aoi and the doctor faced each other. Aoi wanted the doctor to come with him to the association. It might be the only place he could go at this point. The doctor was the most important brother to him. The doctor also knew this, but he begged Aoi to quickly kill him. He wanted to die while still being Aoi's closest brother rather than turning into a monster. Aoi reluctantly gritted his teeth, wanting to grant the doctor's wish. Yet Chihiro ran in to interfere, preventing Aoi from killing the doctor. As a result, the doctor completely transformed into a monster. The inspector's group was interrogating the thugs to find Aoi's location. Things were becoming increasingly troublesome. Chihiro attacked the doctor who had turned into a monster, continuously trying to reason with him. Aoi also came to help, but he couldn't do anything either. Behind the doctor's tremendous power was the nurse's backup controlling his power. Chihiro activated his abilities, using a great source of power. Quickly, that power spiraled out of control and dissipated, leaving Chihiro with a horrified expression. The doctor monster lunged to attack again. This time they fought one-on-one. Chihiro summoned a beam of light that swept everything clean, trying to increase his power. Aoi observed the battle, unable to understand how this could happen, only speculating that Chihiro had awakened the power of the Crimson Lotus King. The doctor still had some consciousness, screaming inside for Chihiro to stop. He clung to Chihiro, absorbing power from him. He advised Chihiro not to become like himself, but to save everyone. He believed in Chihiro. Then, the doctor dissolved into red smoke amid Aoi's desperate screams, leaving behind only a brilliant red stone. Aoi turned and walked away, tears welling in his eyes. Chihiro also collapsed, the moon tonight very bright. Chihiro gave the stone left by the doctor to the nurse. She sadly took the small object, looked at it intently, then gently thanked Chihiro for staying with the doctor until his final moment. For those of heroic lineage, death was not the end. They would transform into a red crystal. In another dimension, Dux and Shoko met to exchange information. Chaos was controlling those of heroic lineage to fight and destroy each other. When all of heroic lineage disappeared, this world would be destroyed. They had to destroy Tokyo, and only those of heroic blood could survive. They would become the Crimson Lotus King and form the foundation for the new world that would follow. Only a single hero was permitted to exist to protect the world. The notion of just one person made Shoko secretly hope it would be her. Aoi stood silently in a corner, recalling the recent battle, his mind surging with mixed thoughts. He wondered if Chihiro had the ability to become the Crimson Lotus King. Beautiful memories with the doctor rushed through his mind, the image of his friend who had left them still haunting him. He questioned himself about his ability to defeat Chihiro, whether he could win or not. In anguish, he threw a rose branch down from a high-rise building. Yuri and the villain team appeared afterward. One of them expressed joy, thinking they had eliminated a hero. The leader announced that the second Great Unconsciousness Day was approaching, that they needed to sacrifice more lives to achieve their goal. Amid this atmosphere, Yuri appeared silently sad, the glimpse of sorrow in her eyes making those around her feel strange. Aoi coldly emphasized that this time they must hunt and kill those of heroic lineage. If hindered, they would have difficulty conducting the experiment. One of them agreed because now was the most opportune time to attack. The boss asked if Yuri agreed. She agreed, but a trace of sadness appeared in her eyes. Seeing this, the boss ordered her to quickly carry out the mission for him. Concluding the meeting, Aoi discussed with his teammates about killing Chihiro first. Since Chihiro had killed his closest friend, he wanted Chihiro to die when he was most desperate. This time, Aoi wouldn't let Yuri participate, believing her personal emotions would be obstructive. Only he and Haru would take part in this mission. Chihiro sat alone in the flower garden, remembering the doctor, the times they spent together, and his final words. His heart felt empty and concerned as he wondered if he could become the person the doctor once was. Yuri appeared, approaching him gently as if to comfort him. They sat beside each other watching the flowers, both carrying things they wanted to say but held back. Yuri expressed joy at seeing Chihiro again, saying she often came to this place whenever she needed to think. But this time she came specifically to meet Chihiro. She placed before him a cup of cocoa she had made herself, trying to make it taste like what Chihiro's mother had made. The warm cocoa aroma softened the atmosphere between them. Chihiro remembered what she had said before and asked about his family. Yuri recounted that before the disaster, his mother and her father had worked together in a laboratory. They were at this place before the experiment failed. Since then, Chihiro's mother had been pulled into another world, and Yuri's father had completely changed. He no longer looked at her as a daughter, devoting all his mind to opening the gate between worlds. Chihiro also stopped coming to this place. Yuri wanted to find him but was forbidden by her father. Yuri was lonely and helpless. She missed Chihiro, but she could only live as her father wanted. She said her father only saw her as a container of heroic blood, not as a daughter. She had been forced to participate in terrible things, even compelled to do things against her heart. This house was the only place she felt she belonged. Chihiro thanked Yuri for the cocoa, saying he felt somewhat better. He sat in the church remembering his mother, the doctor, and Yuri. Then suddenly in his mind appeared an image of Kotsu, lying in a pool of blood just like the doctor before. The thought that Kotsu was not allowed to die ran through his heart like a command. He immediately stood up to search for Kotsu, but couldn't find him anywhere. At that moment, Kotsu was walking with Tsubaki on the street. With the villain team secretly following them, Tsubaki took him to a rooftop. This was Tokyo, but from outside, this view couldn't be seen. This was Tsubaki's favorite spot. There were many places she wanted to go with Kotsu. Then she invited him to go eat. Chihiro returned to the flower garden to meet Yuri. At the restaurant, Haru complained about why, as a villain, he had to follow kids on a date. Actually, Aoi was also targeting Tsubaki, believing the Guardian Society was also in their way. Chihiro told Yuri about his prophetic dreams, saying that each time he dreamed of someone, that person would meet something terrible. This time the dream showed Kotsu. Yuri believed Chihiro had the ability to change destiny if he dared try, and she would always believe in him. As soon as Chihiro received a distress call from Kotsu, he rushed to the reported location, but it turned out to be just a request to pay the bill because his brother had forgotten his wallet. Relief flooded through him knowing Kotsu was safe, but before he could catch his breath, the villain team suddenly rushed out to attack. Haru lunged toward Tsubaki to silence her. Tsubaki quickly transformed into combat mode. Chihiro saw Kotsu hanging upside down in midair, the scene identical to the image in his dream. Aoi forbade him from resisting. If he resisted, he would kill Kotsu. Aoi blamed Chihiro for letting the doctor die. Aoi declared he would torture Kotsu to make Chihiro experience a similar loss. He wanted to take revenge on Chihiro, believing everything was his fault. Yuri suddenly appeared amid the chaos and rushed in to save Kotsu. She immediately shielded Chihiro as if forgetting all old connections with her father. Her action was clearly a betrayal to her father. She gathered all her courage to save her friends. Aoi, though angry, couldn't bring himself to take Yuri's life. Meanwhile, the new recruit Haru, whom they had sent to confront Tsubaki, was completely outmatched. Tsubaki ran over to find Kotsu resting by a tree. It turned out Kotsu was still safe. The truth was that Yuri had betrayed her father to save them. She had nowhere to hide. This time fate had brought her to Chihiro to be rescued. In the evening, everyone was invited to the church to meet with the Guardian Society. The journalist received the call and showed displeasure, feeling annoyed at being dragged into troublesome matters. Shoko softly apologized for the disturbance but said the current situation left no other choice. The Guardian Society quickly arrived, and the atmosphere immediately became tense. Chihiro looked at everyone and slowly stated the reason he called them was to propose cooperation, to find ways together to protect the world. As soon as he finished, Tsubaki immediately agreed to cooperate, but other team members argued it was just a naive illusion, and Tsubaki would be disciplined. She strictly accused Chihiro's group of causing danger, even destroying this world. But Shoko countered, saying that what they did wasn't to destroy, but to protect the world from disaster. The girl in the Guardian team, Julia, didn't accept this, viewing Chihiro's group as fanatics who imagine themselves as a national protection organization while killing their opponents. She immediately prepared mentally for battle. The boy Sugura accompanying her also called for his weapon. Kotsu showed no respect either, immediately transforming. Tsubaki hurriedly stopped them, fearing conflict would erupt. in the atmosphere taut as a guitar string. Shoko warned that if Tokyo wasn't destroyed, the world would certainly face extinction. Chihiro boldly countered, believing there was still a way to save the world without destroying Tokyo. Finding this promising, the Guardian Society began to show interest in negotiating. At that moment, he called Yuri to step forward. Upon seeing her, the entire society immediately regarded Yuri as an enemy and collectively rushed to attack. Chihiro hurriedly protected her, boldly declaring that Yuri was an ally. Others glared, believing Chihiro had been deceived, but he refuted with evidence that Yuri had saved Kopusu from the enemy's hands. Kotsu also stood up to confirm, causing the atmosphere to temporarily settle. Chihiro recounted his prophetic dreams and emphasized that Yuri had helped him change fate. Kotsu being alive was clear proof. Chihiro would no longer believe in destiny, but focus only on moving forward. He knew the organization's plot was to eliminate the heroic lineage. Therefore, they had caused the great unconsciousness and turned humans into gates. Chihiro's plan was very simple. As long as those of heroic lineage remained alive, the enemy organization couldn't complete their conspiracy. If everyone cooperated, the chance of victory would be greater. Some people gradually became persuaded, but Shoko still didn't trust Yuri. For her, there were only two choices. Either Tokyo would be destroyed, or the heroic bloodline would be destroyed. Chihiro tried to persuade further, but this attempt at reasoning seemed ineffective with Shoko. Nevertheless, many still agreed to stand by him, with only a few cautious opinions suggesting they shouldn't place trust too soon. Meanwhile, at the enemy base, they were fully aware that Yuri had betrayed them. Her cold father contemptuously called his daughter a foolish boy-obsessed girl, but still considered her useful. He ordered a swift search for Yuri. The journalist continued trying to convince the female police officer not to trust Chihiro, believing the future was woven from the past. If Chihiro's hands were stained with blood now, the future would certainly be drenched in blood. Chihiro had killed his own father to exist. But the girl remained resolute, only saying to follow her to a place for verification. Chihiro was now sitting alone under the moonlight, silently contemplating, when Yuri brought him a cup of hot cocoa. Meanwhile, the police took the journalist to the library, where records of the case from 13 years ago were kept. Here, she proved that Chihiro was not the culprit who killed his father as the journalist had believed all this time. She had hidden some important documents when she learned Chihiro was of heroic lineage. According to the records, 13 years ago, a family suicide occurred at Chihiro's home. When police arrived, Chihiro, in panic, confessed to killing his father. But afterward, he lost all memory. There were marks of strangulation on his neck. The investigation documents showed his father had intended to kill him, but changed his mind and took his own life, leaving a final wish, pleading for his son to continue living. The journalist was stunned. His beliefs of many years turned upside down. Though understanding the truth somewhat, he still found it hard to accept. An urgent call rang out, requiring everyone to gather at the church. Yuri explained that the organization was preparing to cause the second great unconsciousness, but she didn't know the details. Shoko continued to sow doubts, advising everyone not to trust Yuri, but this time most had chosen to stand by the girl. Shoko could only grit her teeth and declare they would regret it. In the familiar flower garden, Yuri was moved by everyone's trust. She rested her head on Chihiro's hand, smiling contentedly because she could finally help him. Chihiro fervently wanted to remember everything about Yuri, believing destiny had begun to turn. Yuri took out a book, a memento that Chihiro's mother had once given her, and handed it to Chihiro. Just upon touching it, he immediately fainted, sinking into another dream, while childhood memories flickered back, revealing the event from 13 years ago. And at that moment, the image of the female police officer being stabbed appeared in his mind. Meanwhile, the female police officer continued her investigation and was accidentally ambushed by the enemy. She fought back valiantly but was eventually severely wounded. The enemy, calling himself the Grim Reaper, said he would bring her a requiem. Back at the church, Shoko took advantage of the situation, shouting that all this was the consequence of listening to the enemy. The police officer struggled to return, only managing to leave a final sign before collapsing and disappearing in the journalist's arms. Shoko once again attacked Yuri verbally. At that moment, Yuri's father appeared, causing everyone to misunderstand that she was a traitor. He declared he would take his daughter home. In response to the expectation in Chihiro's eyes, Yuri said nothing, just silently turned to follow her father. But upon returning home, she was not welcomed. Her cruel father beat her, punished her, and ordered that she never set foot in the flower garden again. In the darkness, amidst the pool of blood, the gloomy image of the journalist appeared again, as if haunted by a series of tragedies. The blood dream prophesied that the next person in danger was the journalist. Chihiro stood silently on the rooftop. Earlier, he had gone to meet the Guardian Society to bow his head in apology. But the eyes from the Guardian Society that fell upon him were full of blame and anger. They turned to Tsubaki, saying that the society could never cooperate with someone who had committed crimes. Chihiro was betrayed by the fool he believed was an ally, and Marie's death was unforgivable evidence. Tsubaki tried to apologize, but those words couldn't salvage anything. They even said that Chihiro bringing the crystal to exchange for forgiveness was ridiculous. They didn't need it and didn't want to see him again. They turned their backs, saying they had no time for this. Even Tsubaki had turned away to follow the Guardian Society. Meanwhile, on the enemy side, the plan had begun. They were continuing the plan to transform humans for the next great unconsciousness. A strange sound rang out, spreading throughout the sealed room, causing people to gradually turn into monsters. At that moment, Chihiro was still being reprimanded by the Church Society for having cooperated with Yuri, causing the cooperation with the Guardian Society to be broken. He could only apologize. The nurse reiterated that she had never put faith in that cooperation, that destroying Tokyo was perhaps the quickest way to liberation. The nurse, after listening, just sighed. She said she had to leave to continue research, to find a method to save this world. The journalist pulled Arrow along, asserting that he needed to recover important data and had his own plan. Shoko remained standing there, mumbling about the distorted ideal that only she believed in. When reviewing the data, the journalist discovered that the police officer might have been killed because she had found something extremely important. He vowed to personally avenge her. Hearing this, Arrow asked to follow, willing to be his partner. They were being followed by Chihiro. Very quickly, the journalist caught Chihiro sneaking around. He wondered if Chihiro had come to kill him. He guessed that Chihiro had dreamed of his death and thought he would become Chihiro's next victim, saying everything Chihiro did was just for Yuri and himself, and that he couldn't change his murderous destiny. Chihiro couldn't deny it, but also insisted that he wanted to change fate, yet was met with coldness. In the end, the journalist and Arrow still turned away, warning him to stay as far away from them as possible if he didn't want to die. In the darkness, the enemies were also discussing. It seemed their secretive plan had been discovered. Aoi mentioned killing Chihiro. He insistently requested to take action, but the chairman refused, knowing that Aoi was left with only blind hatred. Aoi angrily left, leaving the tattooed man to stand up and provoke the chairman, suggesting that Chihiro was a thorn in their side and recalling how Chihiro had once drawn in Yuri, the Guardian Society, and the Church nearly teaming up. He could bring people together and might potentially become the Crimson Lotus King in the future. At the same time, in the prison cell, Yuri was immersed in thoughts of Chihiro through a childhood photo taken together. The nurse sat alone in the laboratory, staring at the stones left by the deceased. Elsewhere, Kotisu went to find Tsubaki, telling her that the journalist might face disaster. He wanted to ask Tsubaki, under the name of the Guardian Society, to help him. Tsubaki silently nodded, saying she would step in to help. The journalist at that time was reviewing information, looking at Arrow who had fallen asleep and sighing, unsure if Tsubasa was watching over them. In his hand was a map with areas circled in red, and coincidentally, it led to the place where Shoko had once ordered the destruction of Tokyo. Just as he was lost in thought, he realized Chihiro was still secretly following him. He went to the park to sit and talk with Chihiro. The journalist laughed scornfully, saying he no longer cared about life or death, as he was originally the only survivor from a family that had chosen suicide. He looked straight at Chihiro, asking why someone who had once been willing to kill his own father now clung to life. He questioned Chihiro again about that year's case. Chihiro firmly refused, confessing that he no longer remembered everything clearly. But since that day, he had lived only in suffering, and had once wished he had died then. However, in his heart, there was still some reason to continue living, so he couldn't die yet. In his eyes now burned the gaze of someone thirsty for life, unwilling to fall. The gaze that the journalist had been searching for all this time. But even so, he still didn't forgive Chihiro. The journalist momentarily paused, then went with Chihiro to the place where the police officer had investigated. There, they followed the remaining clues. The enemy had created all 7 artificial barriers. Suddenly, all 3 were ambushed by the enemy. Arrow immediately took a fatal slash to the chest. The journalist realized they were the ones who had killed the police officer. Chihiro roared and charged forward, but phantoms of the dead clung to his legs, causing him to panic and act wildly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Reaper used threads to bind him. The journalist called for him to use his blood energy, but he couldn't do anything in this state. It turned out the enemy had used eerie music to bind the mind and imprison the heart. The journalist went to his side to encourage him, but was met with a slash. Arrow, despite being seriously wounded, still tried to protect the journalist and was fatally stabbed. She instructed him to survive, then vanished into nothingness. In that moment, the journalist suddenly remembered everything. He heard what seemed like voices of deceased loved ones, urging him to continue living. However, instead of preserving his life, he rushed forward to take the blow for Chihiro. He expressed that his purpose in life was to accuse Chihiro. He couldn't accept that his parents had rejected him. If he loved someone, he wanted to go with them. So he couldn't accept a Chihiro who refused to die with his father, but it seemed he had been wrong. He declared Chihiro completely innocent. In an instant, he looked back at the documents and learned the truth that Chihiro had never killed his father through the case files. Then he fell down. Chihiro caught him, informing Tsubaki in the sky that this enemy was the one who had killed the police officer. Tsubaki pursued the villain. With his final breath, the journalist whispered his last words to Chihiro. He wanted him to survive, and then someday, he thought Chihiro would become the motivation for someone else to live. Having said this, his body dissolved into nothingness, leaving Chihiro with a brilliant red stone. At the same time, in another space, Shoko sat with ducks, learning that another person had departed. Ducks ordered them to try their best, as an upcoming plan was tied to destiny. The opposing organization was scouting to plan an attack on a large theater. The Reaper would be the main singer of the concert that day. Moreover, this performance needed supreme accessories, and at that performance, they planned to end everything. The Reaper would sing a requiem for the Crimson Lotus King. In the end, only Akira was willing to go with Tsubaki to help Chihiro's group. Through the journalist, Chihiro had also learned everything. It was heartbreaking that the journalist had also passed away. He was a good person too. Chihiro was determined at all costs to stop the chaos plot and survive. Everyone went to the church to discuss the cooperation plan. Shoko continued to sarcastically comment on the police officer's death to create division. But Tsubaki remained calm, suggesting it was because she had acted alone. Ducks drew stars on the ceiling, forming the Big Dipper constellation. When this constellation was complete, the second great unconsciousness would occur, and their chance of survival would be nearly zero. Chihiro calculated that they only needed to stop the ritual before it was completed to have a chance to save many people. According to the clues left by the police officer, the final key was hidden in the Infinite Theater, a structure built by the Aval Science Organization. Shoko laughed, suggesting that finally, the journalist had done something useful. She even sarcastically remarked that Chihiro must be very happy now, as the thorn in his side had disappeared. Even when Chihiro asked her to stop, she continued her mockery. Serdid felt uncomfortable, and even Tsubaki found this woman hard to like. Chihiro told himself that he would stop everything with his own hands, that he would be the one who dared to stand up against the cruel fate that had been predetermined. Ducks smirked like someone who had foreseen part of the future. Yuri's father stood by the glass door, calculating for the second great unconsciousness about to begin. Although this plan seemed very perfect, he thought he should still remain vigilant. He considered Yuri now useless for larger plans. Someone in the group mentioned a person who had not yet taken action. He called that person a masterpiece and warned against comparing them to Yuri. Aoi wondered if he treated all experimental subjects this way, to which he replied that he no longer remembered any failures, then threatened that if Aoi wasn't useful enough, he would be eliminated. However, he refused to allow Aoi to kill Chihiro when he suggested it, instead assigning him the mission of protecting another location, an order that angered Aoi, but he dared not disobey. When Aoi didn't understand why the chairman treated him this way, a stubborn character in the corner of the room said if he were Aoi, he might ignore everything to focus on waiting for revenge, even the sacred stone. Yuri's father affirmed that his decision was absolute. Aoi stepped outside and encountered Yuri. He and a new recruit scolded her, blaming that he should have killed Yuri then and continued to deal with Chihiro. Haru believed it was all Yuri's fault, for simping for boys from the enemy side. Tsubaki was cleaning her car in her free time when the new recruit, Haru, drove past. She thought this guy was very bold. He handed her a letter announcing that the day for transporting the artificial sacred stone was today. This news made everyone immediately gather at the church, discussing whether it was a trap or a challenge. if the villain group planned to turn everyone in the theater into hostages, then when Chihiro's group arrived, transform all people into monsters. This scenario would make the second day of collapse turn Tokyo into irreparable chaos. Shoko cruelly calculated sacrificing everyone. Chihiro urgently came up with a plan, believing that as long as they neutralized the piano before the artist began playing, they could break the sound circuit's impact. The plan seemed simple but contained many risks. Chihiro knew he had to act precisely. Alone in the flower garden before setting out, he thought about everything, wondering who would have to sacrifice themselves next. Bloody images returned like a haunting scene, this time with many people. Upon noticing this, Dux remarked that Chihiro could invade others' dreams, saying he seemed too accustomed to blood-stained hands, and that he was seeking redemption more than anyone else. Dux observed that Chihiro had never truly defeated destiny, but Chihiro woke up, this time no longer afraid. His vague belief transformed into cold determination that he could do it. On the night of action, at the theater, Aoi stood stubbornly, causing Haru to remind him. Haru reported that Chihiro would arrive tonight. Aoi was startled to learn that Haru had sent a letter to Chihiro's group to give Aoi a chance to kill him. Haru believed in Aoi. Chihiro's group immediately approached the location by all means. When they appeared, the villain group had already used transformation magic to turn security staff into monsters. The artist on stage began to play mesmerizing notes, making the audience appear soulless, while backstage was a chaotic confrontation. Chihiro broke through the wall and rushed toward the stage with the intention of eliminating the artist before he completed his performance. But Aoi appeared, blocking his path. The surprise attack plan failed in an instant, desperation clearly visible on Chihiro's face when he saw everything not going according to plan. Aoi showed pleasure at his opponent's confusion, adding fuel to the fire. But the performance had reached its conclusion. The Reaper's sound had brought everyone to the brink. Chihiro's group's plan had failed. The Reaper artist transformed everyone into monsters. In the chaos, painful memories flooded back to Chihiro. He remembered the times he had confronted and made Aoi pay. He had taught Aoi a lesson, but then Aoi was betrayed by the Reaper and was pierced. This situation was quickly exploited to initiate a massacre, making the conspirators believe that the Crimson Lotus King would appear amidst the ruins. Suddenly, a deep power within Chihiro awakened, the sign of the Crimson Lotus King flashing like a cold beam of light. Seeing that Aoi had successfully awakened the Crimson Lotus King, the Reaper believed Aoi had served his purpose. He killed Aoi. Haru frantically rushed up wanting to avenge his senior, but was stabbed by the Reaper. But he didn't die because Akira had taken the blow for him. The Reaper praised, saying it was beautiful to die for the one you love. Then Chihiro activated his Crimson Lotus King mode, stepping in to fight the Reaper. The philosophical battle took place in mid-air, and he managed to destroy the Reaper's monster. Shoko clearly showed satisfaction, believing the plan was going in the right direction. Meanwhile, in another place, Yuri's father embraced the lowly girl and cried bitterly because the plan had failed. He would not be able to create another great unconsciousness. And that girl, Chiyu, opened her mouth to call him father. Suri was rejoicing that the second great unconsciousness had been prevented, thinking that from now on the world would be peaceful. Yuri's father summoned his two daughters, Yuri and Chiyu, to his side. He looked at them with cold eyes and announced that from now, the real battle would begin, that it was time for them to abandon everything and enter a new world. He had been saving Chiyu for this very day. The atmosphere in the room immediately became heavy as subordinates whispered that now they must prioritize eliminating Chihiro. These words fell like a cruel command, stunning Yuri. The subordinates urged their boss to explain everything to his daughter. He took the opportunity to look at Yuri and speak ill of Chihiro, saying that he had killed 2 people on their side and thousands of imitations. He painted the image of a traitor to bolster his reasons for hatred. Yuri still kept faith in Chihiro, but the screen in the room turned on, showing footage of Chihiro doing horrific things. These images were like a punch to her fragile trust. At the church, Shoko boasted to Dux that the plan had succeeded. She had destroyed the magic stone that prevented the second great unconsciousness. Although many had died, Shoko showed off as if she deserved great credit, while simultaneously placing blame on the organization, making the atmosphere even more chaotic. Surdit affirmed that Chihiro was the Crimson Lotus King, but Shoko countered that only the final survivor qualified as the Crimson Lotus King, and she believed the only person qualified here was herself. She turned to Dux seeking alliance, but Dux merely smiled. At the hospital, Haru and Akira lay unconscious with severe injuries. Fortunately, Surdid had appeared in time to treat them and take them to the hospital, while Shoko ignored everyone and rushed off to destroy the fossil stones, an action she later flaunted as her own achievement. They guessed that Haru might also be surprised that the very person being hunted had saved his life. While Chihiro always believed there was a way to save everyone, he didn't do things simply for personal honor. Chihiro thought about how to save everyone. In his mind still appeared bloody images and people falling. This thought made him restless. The doctor and Chiyu went to a mysterious place. All along, he had always let Chiyu handle everything without interfering. The little girl had activated a device that made him appear satisfied. She had restored the experimental house of the doctor and Chihiro's mother from that day. They believed that through this device, even if the second collapse failed, he could still force open the gate. This calculation came with enormous risk. Tokyo would be destroyed, but he didn't care about anything. He just needed to see Chihiro's mother once, which to him was more than enough. He was willing to sacrifice the entire world for the person in the other world. At the church, Shoko cursed Chihiro for stealing her opportunity to perform in front of ducks. She believed Chihiro didn't deserve to be the Crimson Lotus King. She would be the one to stop the great unconsciousness and take that position. She wished Chihiro would disappear soon, and she came up with an evil thought: to kill everyone so that she would become the final survivor. The Reaper appeared from somewhere, suggesting that Shoko's thoughts had been tainted, then gently disappeared as he had appeared. The candle in the church fell, burning an entire area of space. Meanwhile, Yuri was being forced by her father to watch videos of Chihiro killing people and being brainwashed by him. She wanted to turn away, but her father forced her to watch from beginning to end. He believed that Chihiro was gradually being eroded by the power of the Crimson Lotus King, unknowingly ending himself. He would soon lose control and destroy everything. He believed that only Yuri could save Chihiro, preventing him from becoming the Crimson Lotus King. Everyone gathered at the church. Shoko was dead, leaving only a stone. Ducks flew in, without a trace of regret for Shoko's passing, and announced a new movement from the enemy team. They planned to take Tokyo to a new world. This time, she would let everyone decide what action to take next. Chihiro became angry, clearly recalling that the initial plan to destroy Tokyo had been her idea. Yuri sat by the bed, worriedly recalling the words her father had used to brainwash her. She was very worried about Chihiro. She went to the familiar house, where Chihiro had been sitting for some time. As usual, she brought Chihiro a freshly made cup of hot cocoa. Even though their sides opposed each other, the feelings between them would never change. Chihiro sat in the old house, drinking the cocoa Yuri brought. Its flavor evoked old memories and reassured Yuri that he was still the same. She couldn't believe he could become the person the screen had portrayed. Chihiro admitted that his actions sometimes carried heavy cruelty, but he believed that if he didn't act with his own hands, he wouldn't be able to save those threatened by the mist and rituals. For his ideals, Chihiro accepted staining his hands with blood. Yuri was shocked and dropped the cocoa cup, seeing that he had changed. Before Chihiro stood up to leave, Yuri grabbed his hand, begging him not to kill anymore. But Chihiro said he was now forced to fight. That inner conflict continued until the organization had a new plot, and Chihiro still refused to avoid the mission that Inoki and Kakihara seemed to have entrusted to him. Yuri begged him, saying he was the only one she needed. She asked him to forget about becoming the Crimson Lotus King and stay with her. She wanted them to run away to a place with just the two of them. Chihiro refused and left. Yuri saw no other way. She transformed to stop Chihiro. Surdid tied her up, arguing that Yuri distracted Chihiro. Chihiro had changed since Yuri appeared, so she was a danger that needed to be eliminated. Surdid would kill Yuri to bring Chihiro back. Chihiro tried to intervene, but that tense situation was suddenly shocked when Yuri killed Surdid. This action stunned him. Yuri hurriedly flew away, her mind confused by her extreme action. She said she didn't know anything, she was just panicking. At the same time, the doctor and Chiyu had activated the system. The destruction signal began to sound. What they feared most had started. The entire city was plunged into darkness and destructive whirlwinds. Despite only 4 people standing together, Chihiro's group remained determined to save the world. Ducks appeared, bringing new information. The center of this destruction device was what had taken the life of Chihiro's mother, and they needed to destroy this device. After encouraging each other, they flew off together. Everywhere was sinking into chaos. The entire city seemed to be swallowed up. The doctor joyfully praised his research work, believing this device had helped connect the two worlds. At this rate, Tokyo would be destroyed. As Chihiro's group was flying in the sky, they were suddenly intercepted by the villain side. The Reaper artist wanted Chihiro's life to settle old scores. In that chaotic moment, everyone decided to leave Chihiro alone. They left him to face the Reaper musician and flew to the organization's headquarters. The person standing there maintained a calm demeanor and continuously attacked to erode his opponent's spirit, claiming his hands were stained with sinful blood, that he was a murderer. Chihiro stood amid this barrage of words, deeply feeling all the wounds that had accumulated in his heart. He voluntarily embraced all sins, acknowledging that he would bear everything so his teammates could be safe. He didn't need to be forgiven. The remaining 3 friends flew to the headquarters they were led to, but it was just an ordinary house. The floors and hallways resembled a memory of a family that once lived there. Dux affirmed that the professor and Chihiro's mother had once researched at this place. Dux's seemingly irrelevant way of speaking made everyone in the group uncomfortable. They looked at each other full of doubt, then focused on their objective. Tsubaki charged forward to slash at the opponent, proudly declaring herself undefeated. The battle on the Reaper artist stage escalated. Chihiro tried to fight back, but was stabbed and fainted. He fell unconscious with a cold metal in his chest. In his unconsciousness, he saw himself lying in a large pool of blood. The dream appeared like repeating scenes, the screams of the departed echoing. Chihiro realized that finally, it was his turn to face fate. The image of Dux appeared, completely different from usual. She was no longer just an observer, but had transformed into a messenger bringing dreams to him. Only now did Chihiro realize she was behind all the prophetic dreams and memories. She had provoked Chihiro with illusions. Dux revealed that everything they experienced seemed like a play being repeated, each actor and detail appearing like templates. The only thing that could change the outcome was Chihiro's will. Chihiro couldn't understand why it was always he who had to bear everything, never forgiven in these performances. Around Tokyo, many monsters rose from the center of the red mist. The streets became a battlefield. The teammates had gone to destroy monsters, leaving Tsubaki and Kotsu alone together. Kotsu confided that he was very happy to be alone with Tsubaki, making her face red with embarrassment. Kotsu admitted he wasn't good at capturing the atmosphere, but this time he had skillfully flirted with the lowly girl, not wanting to live with regrets. At the villa where the doctor was hiding, he tried to flatter Chiyu with sweet words, but Chiyu saw through his true face. She knew he was exploiting emotions to use his children as tools for his ambition. She understood that even Chihiro's mother had been drawn into this deception. The doctor was just a fraud, and the only thing he cared about was himself. The doctor screamed in anger when questioned, threatening and coercing. But those words only revealed his fear. Chiyu stood straight and forced him to be silent. She said she was created from his genes and Chihiro's mother's, so she knew all the secrets. She accused that Chihiro's mother had never loved the doctor. Her only love was for her real family. No matter how hard he tried to open the gate, she wouldn't be there waiting for him. She only hoped to return to her family. Those words pierced through the doctor's mask. The nurse appeared just in time, and her decisive action caused the doctor to panic and flee, a scene that made all his plans begin to falter. The nurse and Chiyu transformed, preparing for combat. Meanwhile, Chihiro, though in pain and exhausted, still refused to give up. He strained himself to return to the battlefield, rushing into the fight with determination to live and fight to the end. Those who had died gave him hope to survive at all costs. In a flash, he pierced his opponent on stage, burning the adversary of destruction. The Reaper believed he had abandoned his humanity. Chihiro quickly eliminated the Reaper and his accomplices. The Guardian Society came to meet Tsubaki at this time. They believed she was going against the title of Guardian and was no longer worthy of that name. They pushed back a cluster of monsters, saying they were just doing their duty. Meanwhile, the nurse and Chiyu were still confronting each other fiercely. The relationship between them was full of resentment and accusations. Chiyu called the nurse defective. The nurse firmly denied this. The two struggled to stop the device, but Chiyu couldn't hold back the machinery. The metal sounds groaned like a death knell. The doctor, almost insanely believing he was about to meet what he longed for, was kicked down by a subordinate. This violent action shattered his pathological moment. Dux appeared. The information from her made everyone's blood run cold. According to Dux, there was only one way left. Chihiro had to sacrifice himself to seal the sinful vein. Only his death could completely stop the machine. Chihiro was very determined to sacrifice himself, but Yuri stood blocking the machine in opposition. She used her entire body to obstruct. She didn't want Chihiro to die. She just wanted to protect his life. Yuri realized she had changed, so she accepted following her own mistakes. The two fell into an intense inner and physical struggle. Finally, Yuri realized she couldn't hold him back forever. She let Chihiro do what was necessary but requested that she go with him. She didn't want to be left behind. She still had power that could help. The two held hands tightly, stepping towards the gate that was gradually opening. The gate was like a blade between two worlds. Their footsteps marked the edge of the boundary. In the final second, Chihiro let go of Yuri's hand. He wanted her to live in his place. For him, nothing in this world was more important than Yuri. He needed to ensure that life would continue. He wanted Yuri to promise him that she would survive. Yuri could only agree. Chihiro flew through the gate and dissolved into the light. The empty sky changed color, blue light gradually returning. Yuri fell freely to the ground, embracing the space where Chihiro had just stood. The loss seeped deeply into her heart like a wound that would never heal. Outside, the remaining groups gathered the remaining fragments. They set about rebuilding a new world in the ashes. The work of repair and healing began. Small foundations were relaid. But everything was not yet over. The villain group still had one survivor. That person was the one who had pushed the doctor down from the high-rise building.